Good afternoon, this is Youngdan from Youngdan Radio again, and today my guest hopefully will be Mr. Ashley Mote. He is an ex-MEP, a British ex-MEP, and we would like to discuss the EU. Hello, Ashley, are you out there?
I am indeed, hi.
Thank you very much for coming on the show today.
My pleasure.
Okay, today I have some questions about the EU, but first of all, can you give the listeners a brief overview of your position in life?
Well, I started life as a businessman, and I spent until my late middle age running a business which unfortunately collapsed in 1990 with the ERM fiasco, which destroyed about 100,000 businesses in the UK, one of which was mine. As a result of that, I was puzzled about what the EU was and why it had had this impact on my life, devastating impact on my life. So I started researching it, and out of that research came my first book on the subject, which was called Vigilance. That was published in 1997. And it really set the train in motion that has filled the rest of my days. I've been speaking all over the world about the European Union, even in the United States on a fairly regular basis. And in 2004, I was elected to the European Parliament on a Eurosceptic ticket, a UKIP ticket to be precise, but we parted company very quickly for reasons I can't go into now. And I sat as an independent for 5 years in this, what I regard as a lunatic asylum, watching the European Union bureaucrats dominate our lives increasingly. And I am one of their most vocal and uncompromising critics. I suppose it has to be said that I am utterly opposed to their existence. I think they have done immense damage to the UK and to many other countries as well, and we don't need them, and we should never have joined. We must have been off our collective trolley when we voted to stay in 1975.
Okay, well, the man that brought Britain into the European community, Mr. Ted Heath.
Edward Heath.
Yes, Edward Heath, or Ted Heath as I call him. He said at the time that there was absolutely no fear of Britain losing any of its sovereignty whatsoever. Now, this turned out to be a bare-faced lie when the papers were released to the public many years later. Why do you think he acted in the fashion that he did? Some people might say that that was treason of the highest order. Do you think, what forced him to do that, or was he just naive?
Well, it has to be said that there is there was then, a body of opinion that genuinely believed that what became the European Union, which then was known as the European Economic Community, was essentially a glorified customs union, a free trade area. And certainly that was where it was pitched. That was the way it was pitched to the British people, and may well have been to other countries. I can't speak for them. But that was certainly the thinking, and I believe that he genuinely thought that there was a benefit to this country in being associated with such a large free trade area. Now, we also know, because we've seen the papers and you've just referred to them, that the Lord Chancellor at the time, Lord Kilmuir, wrote a minute to Heath saying there is no way in which we could join this organisation without compromising our sovereignty. And that, of course, was the real crux of the issue then. Had any of us bothered to read the Treaty of Rome that was signed in 1956 by the original 6 members, we would all have seen that that was precisely the purpose of the European Union as it has now become. The purpose from the very beginning was to set up a single state, and it was to be done by stealth over a long period of time. And again, that is precisely what has happened. But the truth is that, in a nutshell, he lied to us, and I have it in writing. I have the original pamphlet that was put through every letterbox in the country, and he said, and I quote, "There will be no loss of essential sovereignty." It was a barefaced lie.
Yes, well, it's clear this was a lie in hindsight, but was he then acting in a genuine fashion, or was he deceiving by deliberately deceiving the public all along?
No, I think he deluded himself. He chose to ignore Muir's advice. And you have to turn the clock back. You're talking 30 plus years ago, or nearly 40 now. Yeah. There was a feeling in the UK at that time that Britain was becoming a declining power in the world, that we were losing our presence on the world stage, if you like. Our economic performance hadn't been very good. We just suffered from the second long period of socialist government under Wilson, for example. We were not in good shape. So there was an argument that said, what can we do to improve the economic performance of the country? What he didn't do was think it on through to what the consequences might be in the longer term. But what politician ever does that?
Okay, if we go back a bit earlier into the origins of the European Union itself, I have read that the idea was first proposed by a group of German economists as early as 1942, when they held a conference, and they entitled the conference the European Economic Community.
Yes.
And later, when it became even more obvious that the Germans were about to lose the war, they secretly decided that even though they would lose the war, they would actually win the peace. Can you delve into that a bit more for me, please?
Yes, well, you're absolutely right. Hitler was at that time, well, his view was that they were going to win the war. 1942 was just about the peak of their military efforts. And he set up, or some of his staff and associates set up this discussion about the formation of the European Economic Community. And they actually used those very words. And unfortunately, to my horror, and I think to everybody's horror when we eventually found out many, many years later, some of the words in that document that were published in Germany in 1942 about setting up a European community are to be found to this day in the original Treaty of Rome in 1956, signed by the 6 original countries that formed the EU, or what became the EU. So we are talking about a connection directly back to fascism and Nazism of the 1940s. But if I can go on for a minute or so to take you back to 1928 and the Frankfurt School of Marxism, there was a document. I don't have the full document in front of me, but I do have a copy of a relevant extract. There are Marxist connections here as well, because the 1928 declaration by the Frankfurt School of Marxists made an 11-point schedule to promote communism worldwide. Now bear in mind, 1928 we're talking about. Let me just take you through these 11 items and see how many you recognize have actually come to pass today. It is a horrifying similarity. The first of these items was to create a concept of racial offense. Secondly, to continually change the law to create confusion in people's minds. Third, to teach sex and homosexuality to children. 4, to undermine schools and teacher authority. 5, huge immigration should be encouraged to help destroy national identities. 6, the promotion of excessive drinking. 7, empty the churches. 8, dependency upon the state for benefits. 9, create an unreliable legal system which was biased against the victims. 10, control of the media. And 11, encourage breakdown of the family unit.
That's an astounding.
That is one hell of a list.
That is an astounding list. Now, those people were known as the Frankfurt School, and I would ask everybody to actually go on their computer and look up the Frankfurt School and who exactly they were, because I rarely, very rarely hear anybody mention those group of people. And of course they came to the United States and set up their own branches here. And an understanding perhaps of the Frankfurt School would give a person a great understanding as what to see happening in the world today, which might look as if it's just all chaos and happened by accident and whatnot. But in actual fact, it lends credence to the belief that, as you say, this is a long-term, well-thought-out, well-planned, well-orchestrated agenda from 1928, and indeed some people might say a bit earlier than that.
Well, I would have added a 12th one if I'd been a party to this and I was thinking along those lines, which I obviously was not, nor would I. But I'm amazed that there isn't something in that list which says encourage people to spy on each other, because that's the other characteristic which has come out of modern politics. I mean, we've actually, in the UK anyway, in the last 10 years, when the Labour government was in power, they were encouraging individuals to spy on each other. They were encouraging people to report, if you like, social crime, in inverted commas, meaning, you know, if they thought that somebody next door was claiming a disability, a benefit which they were not fully entitled to, people were encouraged to report that opinion, because it could be no more than that in most cases, to the authorities. And I mean, the breakdown in relationships between ordinary people that have followed from all of that list that I've just read out, which have now virtually entirely come to pass, plus this business of encouraging people to spy on each other, the breakdown in relationships and the stability of society is obvious to everybody.
And I would add that you see a very similar things happening in different countries, the United States, Britain and Ireland, just the three examples that we're dealing with. Here you have laws coming in and people are encouraged to, as you say, keep an eye on their neighbours and inform the authorities of any even mundane thing that they might appear out of the ordinary. It's as if a police state has actually been set up, as you say, by a gradual motion, so by the time it's in place, people haven't even noticed that it has been brought into place.
Yeah, that's right. That's what's known as the salami slicing approach. A little bit here, a little bit there. And it's only when you look back at the changes that you see how huge they have been.
So, going on with that thought, can you tell us a bit about what's been brought in, what I would call a federal police force for Europe? In the United States, as you know, most police authorities are local in nature. They just police their own town or city. And you have a small branch of the federal police known as the FBI. But is Interpol morphing into a huge federal police force in Europe? And what powers of arrest will they have